So I've got two prints here. One of them was taken with Ilford Delta 400 and the other one was taken with KODAK TMAX 400. But which one is which? Can you tell? Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be about TMAX and Delta 400 that I'm playing around with at the moment. So in this video I'm going to be doing some tests for myself, but I thought I'd put it out there for you guys to see, even if you take a little bit from the video and write it down in your notes or whatever, especially for people that are new into film photography. You might not, there's so many different films on the market, it can be quite confusing. And the Delta and TMAX range are considered professional films, but what makes them professional? What stands them out from the rest of the films that we see in the shops and online? And the answer is inside the film's emulsion. They're just made differently. And if you're not quite sure how films are made, well, all films have got what's known as silver halides inside, silver crystals inside there, and they react to the light, and that's what forms the image when you take a picture. But nothing happens until you start to develop the film. They stay inside there and you can't see nothing until you start to develop and go through the development process, and that's where all the magic happens. But many films are made with what they call a cubic silver halide or silver crystal. They're cubic in sort of shape and size. If you look through them on a microscope, and there's plenty of images online, I always imagine them to be like millions of cardboard boxes in a room all clumped up together. That's how I get it in my head. But in the late 80s or in the 1980s, Kodak came out with a different kind of emulsion, and they called it their T-grain emulsion or tabular grain. And what they did, they just changed the structure of the silver crystals into more flatter crystals. And the way I imagine that is a room full of iPads all laid out on the floor. And what that was to do, apparently, was to scatter more light around the film to get more tonality and also much finer grain than all the boxes clumped together, to get much finer grain as well. So Kodak came out in the 80s with this new T-grain emulsion, which they called their professional films. And it was designed for people that needed more tonality, needed more sharpness, needed more resolution out of their films, for maybe architecture, landscapes, portraits, or whatever. And a little while later, Delta came along from Ilford, and Delta was their answer to Kodak's TMAX. And Kodak called it T-grain technology, and Ilford called it their shell core technology. Both pretty much the same sort of technology in the emulsion of the films. And there's been lots of tests in the past with TMAX and Delta. I've done a few back in the past, but I thought it's time for me to put these two head to head again, just to see which one I would prefer going forward for my own photography and in my own particular developer. So in this video, I'm going to be shooting these two films head to head with Berspeed Developer, which is a speed enhancing developer that I'm experimenting with at the moment. So I want to see how these films differ in that developer. And Kodak do say that the TMAX is the sharpest film in the world. Ilford doesn't say that on their film, but we know that they're both very fine-grained films. We know that they're very sharp, and we know that they've got bags of tonality. Some people say that the Delta is a bit softer and a bit more flatter than the Kodak TMAX, which is a bit more punchier. But I'm going to go out in a minute and shoot both films and see what I get when I come back. Also go in the darkroom. I'm going to make some prints. I won't go in the darkroom with the cameras, but I'll show you the prints that I make, just so I can see a side-by-side comparison. I'm going to be using two cameras and one lens. So I've got two Nikon cameras and one lens, which is a 35mm lens. And what I'll do is I'll load the Delta into this camera. This one's got a meter on it. So I'll load the Delta into this camera and I'll load the TMAX into this one. And then I'll just swap the lenses over. So it doesn't matter what camera I use, but as long as I keep the same lens, it wouldn't be fair if I used a different lens for both films. So it's going to be on the same lens. And then when we come back indoors, I'm going to do a few close-up shots with a different lens, Nikon 55mm micro lens as well. So let's get on with it, and we'll go outside and we'll start these little tests. And like I say, if this helps anyone along with their film photography journey, just even if you do pick up a little bit of information from this video, write it down, then it's done its job. But these are the sort of tests that I do on a regular basis with different films and different developers, and play around even off camera. So let's get out, we'll do some shots and see what we can come up with. So I've got a beautiful scene over there with all different tones. So a good black and white film, I should be able to pick all those lovely tones up. Highlights, blue sky, we've got cloud, we've got dark parts around the trees, we've got some light tones going off in the background, and I've brought out two cameras with me, and I've also brought out some filters as well. So I'm going to try an orange filter and a red filter. So I'll start off with the Delta 400 because I've got a light meter on this FM3A. The F2 hasn't got a light meter, so we'll start off with this one so I can get my meter in. And we'll shoot F11. I've got to be careful because that sun's going to come in and out, so I've got to time it just right. Wait for the sun to get at its brightest. And we'll do exactly the same thing on the F2. Change the lens over. Exactly the same shot. So now I'm going to put filters on. So I'm going to start off with the orange filter. So what this orange filter is going to do is darken that blue sky, but I'll just be interested to see what both films, the difference is, if there is any difference with an orange filter. And then we'll come down to 1/25 of a second for both cameras. We'll start off with the F2, sun's out again, lovely, orange filter on, that one's done. Swap the lenses over, 1/25 of a second, same metering. That one's done. And we'll do exactly the same thing this time with the red filter, and that's going to be 3 stops difference. And the same again with the F2. That's that done. So I've got a lovely textured wall which was behind me from when I was over there, so I'm going to get a photograph of this textured wall. Just 2 shots, 1 on each camera. And we'll do the same with the F2, which has got the TMAX inside. There you go. Right, let's see what else I can find on my bike. So I just took 2 more photographs of this scene here. I had to wait for the sun to come out. It's quite easy when you've got your eye through the viewfinder and you're waiting for the sun to come out. It might look a bit deceiving, but always look at the shadows. That will give you a massive telltale that the sun is out and full pelt. So I took 2 there without a filter, and then I spun around and took 2 more shots there with a red filter on, with both cameras and both films. And I'll grab a couple more with some texture on this woodwork here, so we'll just get some texture shots in. That's one. Switch over to the TMAX. Done. So I've now got a few photographs on them films to develop and see how they come out with the filters and without the filters, and these scenes, and lots of tonality as well. Let's go back and we'll do it in a more controlled environment. So I'll take a few shots in a more controlled environment, maybe a different lens. So this is my back door, missus. So this lamp is often a little test product for me to shoot different films with. It's always in shade, it's got texture, it's got a brick wall. It's pretty much perfect for testing my films. So that's on the Delta. Over to the TMAX, the same thing. Done. This is one of the fun things I like about film photography. There's so much experimentation you can do, different films, different developers and different cameras, different lens, you know, it's so much that you can play with. I just love playing around and experimenting. And like I said earlier on, if this helps anybody with deciding over TMAX or Ilford Delta, you know, even if you could take a little piece from this video and write it down or whatever, for me personally, I can always refer back to these videos when I'm shooting these films. I've also got 100 speed Delta and TMAX to play around with next. So not today, but that's going to be my next challenge. And of course, I have shot these films plenty of times before. I know what they do. I know what they're capable of. But it's just interesting to, you know, play around and give yourself a refresher with a couple of rolls of film and try different scenes, you know, and just see how they turn out. In my bag every time I go out. What about Delta? Give it a shout. It's a little bit soft for the TMAX. Sort of bring a light over. Okay, so now we've got some light. We'll close the blind. And this time I'll swap lenses. I'll go over to a Nikon 55 micro lens so I can get a bit closer, a bit of detail, and get this on a tripod. Okay, so now I focus right in on the string. What I can do with these shots is overexpose a couple of stops. So shoot one at metered, then overexpose a couple of stops, underexpose a couple of stops. See if I've got enough film in the camera. So we choose f5.6, it gives us a nice shutter speed to work with. So this is a metered shot. And then we'll go one stop over. So with the guitar, I thought I would try different exposures just to see for myself how both films perform. And this is the Ilford Delta 400 overexposed and underexposed by a couple of stops. And I'd have no problem printing these in the darkroom. And then over to the TMAX 400, again, same exposures I did here, and no problem again printing these in the darkroom would be no problem at all. But there is a unique difference showing up between the two films, and I'm glad that I noticed. I'll show you that in a short while when we start pixel peeping at all the images. But before that, I'll show you the negatives that I developed in that Berspeed developer. So these are the two strips of negatives that I developed in the Berspeed developer. The KODAK TMAX was 8 minutes and the Ilford Delta was 9.5 minutes. And I'd already done pre-tests with strips of this film anyway to find the right times for that developer. So that was the best times that I could get. And you can see the negatives look very, very similar. There's no real distinction between the two. Let's move over to the guitars. And again, there's the guitars there with the overs and underexposures. You'd be hard pushed to see any difference between these two. It's only when you scan or print that you can start seeing some differences. Let's have a look at the outside shots that I took. And again, very similar, even with the filters. I don't know what happened to that one with the filter. I think I nudged the to F16. But let's have a look at the scans. We'll have a look at the softness between the two, the sharpness, and also the contrast as well. So that was the very first shot that I did on the Delta 400. Let's open up the TMAX. And that's the one I did straight after on TMAX. So looking at both of them side by side there, that's the TMAX looks a little bit more sparkly than the Delta 400. That's the Delta 400. The tones on the TMAX, here we go, they just seem to pop a little bit more. I'm looking at this grass area here. Let's zoom into this pole and see how sharp both films are. TMAX seems, I'm looking around this area, around the pole and the trees. The TMAX seems a little bit sharper. The Delta 400 is a bit more softer. You can see that. Hopefully you can. Yeah, TMAX definitely wins over the sharpness. It does say it's the sharpest film in the world. Very, very fine grain on the Delta 400 as expected, and also the TMAX, very, very fine grain again. So that's the Delta guitar. That's the TMAX guitar. Can't really see much of a difference between the two. Oh, hang on a minute. This area here, the guitar is red at the top here on the Delta. It's kind of lighter than the TMAX, so maybe it's got a different spectrum sensitivity, the TMAX than the Delta. When it comes to reds, look, you can see that's sort of darkened down, almost orthochromatic. That's interesting. Let's look at the plectrum, the sharpness. We'll go into the plectrum. That's meant to say Dunlop 46mm. I'm looking at this area. Let's look at the TMAX. Oh wow, I can see that much more clear. This was on a tripod as well. That's the TMAX and that's the Delta. So the Delta on this photograph is definitely a little bit softer than the TMAX. Let's have a look at the lamp that I took, and that was in shade. Wow, okay, straight away I can see a difference. That's the TMAX. You can see it's a lot more punchier than the Delta. There's the Delta. It's kind of a bit soft in the background. You can see it, the tonality. It's kind of more grey. But the TMAX certainly gives more punch in the brickwork there, which is red. Which that's interesting because the guitar redness on the Delta was softer or lighter than the red on the TMAX, and this is a brick wall. So there's definitely a difference in the spectrum there. Look, so that's the red wall there on the Delta, and that's the red wall on the TMAX. That's probably what's giving it its punchy look. Let's zoom into the lamp itself, and I'm looking at the sharpness area around here. So that's the TMAX there. Yeah, and the Delta's certainly softer on the sharpness. You can see it there. So we're about 15 minutes into the video, and if you've stuck around this long and still watching, I've got to say a massive thank you to you for your interest. These videos take me quite some time to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and hit a like button as well. It does help the channel with the algorithm and help the channel grow as well. So if you've watched this long, thank you very much. That's as long as you're not asleep. And let's carry on with the video. So in all honesty, between both films, I really didn't see much. You know, if anything, yeah, sure, the Delta 400 is a little bit softer, a little bit flatter maybe than the Kodak TMAX. But I went in the darkroom and I made some prints. This was the lamp here, and that really did surprise me with the reds being a little bit darker. I'd never looked at the spectral chart of both films before, and sure enough, the Kodak is a little less sensitive to red than the Delta is. So this is the Kodak there, and you can see there's a little bit more contrast in it because of the red brickwork than the Delta. But if I look at them for sharpness, looking at both, I'm looking right on the lamp. This is 10x8 prints, and I'd be hard pushed to tell the difference. But I did do a couple of enlargements. I'll show you that in a moment. But I'd be hard pushed to see the difference in sharpness. You know, at the end of the day, if you go into a gallery, who's going to be looking at prints this close? You're really not. You're at gallery distance. What's that? 2 or 3 feet away. You know, I can't tell the difference, to be honest with you, other than the sensitivity that I said. The other 2 prints that I did was of the landscape, the first shots without any filters. And again, I think the Kodak was a little bit sparklier, but I can't see no difference at all, really. The Kodak might be a little bit lighter, but possibly the light might have changed. It was very difficult when you're doing outside photography like that. That's why I came indoors and did the same sort of thing. Yeah, the Kodak's a little bit sparklier, I would say, which, you know, a little bit lighter in some of the highlight areas, but that could have been me. So this one is the Kodak, and this one is the Delta. And to be honest with you, the guitar and the prints, the way I've printed them, you can't tell the difference at all in the red. They both look quite dark, but the major difference is in the highlight area with the plectrum. I can definitely see the information written on that plectrum much more detailed than I can with the Delta. But then I enlarged as well the same negatives as if it was a 16-inch print. So you can see I've gone in much closer this time, just so I can see for myself. And again, with the Kodak, I can see clearly what it says on the plectrum, but a little bit more difficult on the Delta. And looking at the grain between the two, looking at the plectrum, it's so fine. I really can't see if there's... I'm just going to give them equal grain, I think. If anything, maybe the Kodak TMAX is a little bit sharper, I don't know. It's hard. So what's the point in even looking at these prints, trying to find which one's got the most grain? To me, they both look the same, and I got my bins on as well. So, but out of anything, I was interested to know that the TMAX is a little bit less sensitive to the reds than the Delta, and going forward between the two, knowing that possibly the Delta is a little bit softer, maybe gives a little bit more softer tonality, which isn't as hard on the shadows, etc., as the TMAX. Maybe this would be a good film to use on bright sunny days for landscapes where the shadows are quite harsh, etc. This might work better, and maybe on flatter days when I'm shooting landscapes or seascapes, the TMAX might just give a little bit more punch. So it's quite interesting. That's something I'll have to write down and play with in the future. But let me know in the comments, guys, if any of you shoot these films. Have you done any tests yourselves? If so, what developers? There's a bunch of developers I could have used. I chose the Berspeed because that's the one that I'm using at the moment. If you was to use something like 510 Pyro, you get amazing results with tonality and more than likely grain as well. But I was using the Berspeed developer for myself. But let me know in the comments if you're used to these films, if you shoot them often, what do you use them for? Do you use both films, one for some subjects and the other for other subjects? I'd be interested to know, and I'm sure other people will as well. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it interesting. I certainly did with these results. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.